This episode may contain adult themes and explicit language. Listener discretion is advised.
Sorry.
What's the trick in making my love stick? What's the trick?
Hello, and welcome to the Film Critic, the Common Man podcast. While other film podcasts might try to con mental patients, we actually do want to just watch the World Series. Every episode, we discuss a film from the perspective of a film critic and the perspective of a common man. We may not agree, but certainly won't be boring. I'm your co-host, Ben Miller. I'm a film critic, and I write about films for my own site, Ice Cream for Freaks. I'm joined by my brother and common man co-host, a man with the mental fortitude to pass as a deaf mute, Jake Miller. How you doing, buddy?
Doing good. That's the best compliment you've ever paid me.
I think you could figure it out. You're like, you know what? It's like, I need to just get through this situation. It's like, it's like, what I'm going to do is I'm going to act like, well, not to mention, if you act like a deaf mute, nobody's really going to bug you all that much.
Yeah. You just got to pull it off. I mean, it's just,
oh, do you want to talk? Like, you don't, I don't really want to talk to anybody. It's like, but how often do you want to go, dude, shut up, shut up, or something, especially in that environment. We're on to a new month. It's we don't really have a theme this month, but the Oscars are right around the corner. And how about one of the biggest success stories of Oscar history? We're talking about One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, directed by Milos Forman, written by Lawrence Halbin, I believe is how you say it, and Bo Goldman, based on the book by Ken Kesey, starring Jack Nicholson, Louise Fletcher, Brad Dourif, Will Sampson, and Danny DeVito. Co-starring William Redfield, Sidney Lassick, Vincent Schiavelli, William Dewell, Scatman Carruthers, and Christopher Lloyd. Opened on November 19th, 1975, a massive box office hit for the type of film it was.
yeah.
Reportedly around $3 to $4.5 million budget, $108 million internationally. It's the second highest grossing movie of 1975, just behind Jaws. So did just fine.
Yeah.
108.9 million in US, 54.4 international, 163.3 on a $4 million budget. The Oscars were the real big thing for that. It is nominated for 9 Oscars. Won Best Picture, Director, Best Actor for Nicholson, Best Actress for Louise Fletcher, and Best Screenplay. It is at the time, it was the second movie to ever do that. It's one of 3 movies to ever win all 5 of those awards. Also nominated for Best Supporting Actor for Brad Dourif, lost to George Burns for The Sunshine Boys. Best cinematography nomination lost to Barry Lyndon, and then best film editing and best original score nominations both lost to Jaws. On the American Film Institute, they came out with some list of the 100 greatest American movies of all time. Their first list in 1998, it was ranked number 20. On 2008, it was ranked number 33. They also had lists of the top 10 villains or 100 villains and heroes. Nurse Ratched was number 5 on the list of all-time villains.
Yeah.
The one list that AFI has that I don't really agree with is a Cheers, as far as like triumphant movies. It was ranked 17th. I mean, there's kind of a heroic end at the end, but I mean, of all it's kind of a bummer. It's kind of a bummer for being 17th. I mean,
yeah,
it is. I understand the purpose, but it's It's a Wonderful Life was number 1. Like, even that was I guess I don't understand this list. Inspiring films, I guess, is the point. Okay, so I'll talk about this list real quick. So the most inspiring films, the list: 1, It's a Wonderful Life; 2, To Kill a Mockingbird; 3, Schindler's List; 4, Rocky; 5, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington; 6, E.T. the Extraterrestrial; 7, Grapes of Wrath; 8, Breaking Away; 9th, On Miracle on 34th Street; 10th, Saving Private Ryan. I'm not sure they understand this list. I'm not sure they understand the point of what this is.
No,
it's inspiring. Like, anyway, so
inspiring to do what? Go to a mental health hospital?
One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest is one spot ahead of The Diary of Anne Frank. Like, I don't understand.
Schindler's List, like nothing.
It's third. There's
That's
nothing like it's a yes, it's heroic, but there's nothing inspiring about Schindler's List. Yeah,
those are all tragic stories.
yes, it's like To Kill a Mockingbird #2. It's like you've missed the point of that movie.
I'm not saying they're not great movies.
Yeah.
Those are all great
Yes,
movies. I just
yes.
don't think about, inspiration and
You
I
know,
don't. I mean,
Rocky,
I don't know.
Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. You got me. Miracle on
Okay.
34, Miracle on 34th Street. I'm on board.
Okay.
Apollo 13, Hoosiers. Yeah. But I mean,
All right.
sure. But those are sprinkled in with some real bummer. The Bridge on the River Kwai is in there. I've never been inspired by Bridge on the River Kwai. The entire point of the movie is what it's. We'll talk about, maybe we'll talk about that list some other time. That's an insane list. Anyway, it was ranked number.
That sounds like a dumb list, if I'm being honest.
Not wrong. It was number 17, but anyway. So on Rotten Tomatoes, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, 93% from critics, 96% from audiences. It was obviously over the moon, ecstatic at the time in 1975. Dulled a little bit as the years have gone on, but it's still, just the idea of psychiatry from 60 years ago.
Yes.
Yeah. But and I'm sure we'll get into that. So the plot summary, real quick, of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. This is set in Oregon. So Randall McMurphy is Jack Nicholson. He is he is sent to work on a work farm for a statutory rape of a 15-year-old. He pretends to be insane to get transferred to a mental institution to avoid the hard labor. When he gets there, he is under the supervision of Nurse Mildred Ratched, played by Louise Fletcher. He meets the other inmates, as it were. There's Chief Bromden, played by Will Sampson, a large seemingly deaf mute Indian man. William Redfield, who is Dale Harding. Dale Harding is the character. He's a repressed homosexual. Billy Babbitt, a stuttering suicidal man, played by Brian Dourif. Charlie Cheswick, who is played by Cindy Lassick, a neurotic man with temper tantrums. Max Tabor, played by Christopher Lloyd, a really angry, psychotic guy. Danny DeVito as Martini, a little man you could just put in your pocket. Childlike. Couple other guys thrown in there. And then, so essentially, he gets there and I guess McMurphy's approaches it as like, okay, well, I just kind of need to do my time, buy my time, I'll get out, and that's that. And then he's very much against Ratched, rallying kind of the leader of all these inmates. He takes him out on a fishing trip with prostitutes and all this kind of stuff. And the more he kind of rebels, the more Ratched tries to tamper down on him. He discovers that Chief is not a deaf mute, but is just a way of getting by. He also discovers that himself, Chief, and Max, Christopher Lloyd, are the only characters who are actually committed. Everybody else is there voluntarily. But Ratched essentially has an iron fist, frighten them into staying. So he encourages everybody to try to break out of everything. He tells Chief, it's like, well, let's escape. And before they escape, they decide to have a big party. And in this party, they bring prostitutes and liquor. Everything kind of goes nuts. And then, but on the plus side, Billy gets to lose his virginity to this prostitute. Overcomes his stutter in standing up to Nurse Ratched. And Nurse Ratched's like, no, I'm going to tell your mother about this. He loses it, eventually kills himself. This causes McMurphy to try to strangle Nurse Ratched. Unfortunately, he is subdued, and
choke that bitch.
Man, he sure tries, and he's subdued and taken away. Flash forward to a couple of weeks later. Nurse Ratched is very raspy, has a neck brace on it, is kind of put in her place, and everything seems pretty good around the ward. But then there's some rumors about McMurphy escaped or he's dead or whatever, and Chief sees him come in. He's walked quietly to his bed and he realizes he's had a lobotomy. So the Chief mercy kills him by smothering him with a pillow, and then he picks up a hydrotherapy hydrotherapy thing that McMurphy also tried to rip out of the ground, bursts through the window and escapes, and the end. And Chief is actually the titular one who flew out of the cuckoo's nest. So it's such an interesting type of film, just because, you know, we have a lot to get into. Insane Asylum as a plot device in general, always seems like a narratively rich thing to always get into.
Yeah, I mean, there's got to be a lot. I mean, there's a lot there. Same thing as a prison environment,
and it kind of is a prison movie,
a war environment. I mean, you've automatically got, you know, conflict, and you know, everything comes with the setting, I guess. Like you already kind of have your conflict there, your
hierarchies, your dynamics. I mean,
good guys, bad guys. It sets up pretty quick in an environment like that, I guess.
Yeah, and it's interesting because, like, especially in this film, it's really, you know, McMurphy goes into it being like, I'm not nuts. I'm lazy. I don't want to work. And so I'm going to act like I'm insane in order to essentially make it better for myself. But as he gets there, you know, you kind of, as it goes along, you're like, okay, well, maybe he is crazy, and maybe but we'll get into that a little bit later. But the idea of him being there is not necessarily to just stir the pot. It's essentially, it's the difference between, like, okay, these people might have some mental deficiencies or mental issues, but it doesn't make them any less human, which these orderlies and these nurses have kind of reduced them to.
Yeah, I mean, he's a con man. He's definitely working the system, you know, in order to get a relatively cush spot. And well, I say, well,
you know, it's funny. There's
sometimes a cush spot, but
at the same time, like, as you're going, as I'm kind of watching them, I think at one point, whenever they're doing like hydrotherapy, and Nicholson's like hanging out in the pool, I'm just like,
oh yeah.
You know what? All things considered, this doesn't seem so bad. Like there's definitely
better in prison or being on a work detail on the side of the highway or something.
And I've seen, and you know, there are other insane asylum movies or films along these lines that are like, that show these places as just abhorrent. And this was not. On the rewatch, I remember thinking, is like, oh yeah, this terrible insane asylum. And as I'm watching, I was like, it seems okay. Like I'm not talking about like, Ratched is ruling everything with an iron fist, but I mean, it's not like they clean you up, they give you food, like they're not depriving you meals. It's like it's general like control, but it's not like general. Like you seen Born on the 4th of July.
Yeah,
with like when the hospitals he's in after he gets that's what I always kind of thought it was like. And then I'm rewatching, I'm like, okay, it's not really that.
Yeah, well, and I think something indicative is that scene. They're in a group therapy session, and he figures out how many people are there voluntarily, essentially, and he's like, what the hell, man?
What are you doing here? Yeah.
Why are you here?
Yeah.
But I think for them, I mean, even though it's not great and you get treated like shit from Nurse Ratched, they know they need to be in there. It's a more secure, safe place for them to be. Like, I think they understand what they are, and they're like, yeah, I'm here because I need to be here.
Yeah, and that's one of the things the film, I was surprised, did. It's like, it doesn't just, like, nobody's being held against their will. Like nobody, with the exception of Chief and McMurphy, who are conning their way through it, essentially.
Yeah.
Everybody seems like they're in the right place.
Right. Yeah. Like, no, everyone else pretty well seems to have legitimate mental health issues that, and even Chief, whenever the idea of escape comes up, he kind of explains like, I can't be out there. And to me, the way I interpreted it was probably alcohol abuse.
Yeah, he talks about his dad. He talks about
like he's ended up shriveled up and
sure.
And Jack Nicholson said, killed him, did it? He said, I didn't say it killed him. I just said it worked on him, just like they're working on you. And so I think ultimately for Chief, he's like, I can't drink in here. This is going to keep me out of trouble. I can play the role I need to play and just be a survivor.
Yeah, essentially, it's not like Chief is like his existence is like he's not a part of the therapy sessions. He's in the back. He doesn't have to really listen. He's just kind of like it's boring. It's monotonous. And even whenever they get back from the I noticed whenever they get back from the electroshock therapy, like Nicholson's faking like he's brain dead, and Chief has a broom, and he's doing everything that Nicholson is doing with less flash, essentially. Like he's
not being a smart ass about it.
He's not being a smart ass about it. Exactly. And and even it's funny actually, whenever they're, like you said, whenever they're saying being Nicholson really or McMurphy really pushes up against the other guys where they're like, you guys are here voluntarily, like they can keep me here as long as they want, and I've been screwing with her, y'all didn't tell me this. Like it's kind of I like the unnecessary humor.
Well, and there is that moment whenever they're like in the pool or whatever, and he tells one of the orderlies or whatever, he's
60 something days,
68 days, I'm out of here. And he's like, what are you talking about, man? He's like, that's jail time. He's like, you're on our watch. You leave when we say you leave.
It's funny.
Kind of realizes maybe he stepped off in a world he shouldn't have.
Well, it's funny. It's funny. That's always the lazy screenwriters on these films, and they're like, I'm going to plead insanity. I'll spend a month in the things and get out of it. And it's like, well, it's not really bored out of any sort of realism. It's like, that's not really how the real world works. And then I actually made a joke about something the other day about Lorena Bobbitt. That is exactly what happened to her. Whenever she cut off her husband's penis, the big trial, she was declared not guilty by reason of insanity. She spent 45 days in an institution and it was free. Like I was like, she is the example of like, oh no, this is
she's a Randall McMurphy.
She's the Randall McMurphy. It actually worked. And so, I mean, it's one of those things like, but this is it's a little more realistic than I was expecting as far as like for some reason I had this remembrance of it being more dramatized as far as like the treatment of the people, the orderlies being sadistic, and it's like it wasn't really doing that. It's much more mental manipulation.
Yes, it's much more psychological. I mean, Nurse Ratchet's weapons are her passive aggressive comments, belittling actions,
knowing the characters, like Billy's mom, like Billy's mom's the thing.
She knows that's his leverage point. Like, man, he is
Dale's wife. Like, is like, this is the thing I'm going to talk about, and that's the thing that's going to mess with him.
She knows everyone's Achilles heel, and that's what she attacks.
Yep.
And she belittles them and controls them based on that. So it's not like she's, coming out with chains and whips and everything, but she is doing it psychologically to people that are already very much psychologically damaged.
Yeah. And this is, we talked about it a little bit earlier. Just like, this is kind of like a prison movie. It's not really like, now the funny thing about the prison movie is now Nicholson was under like the first half of this movie. He's like McMurphy's under the assumption it's like, well, I'm just crazy. It's no big deal. Like they take me back. I don't get added is like crazy. It's special. Like that's why they go on the boat trip and come back. Like they don't go somewhere else because there's no consequences essentially. But after that second half, they're like, okay, now this is turned into a prison movie. This is fully escape. And there's a really interesting line there, like right at the end, right after Billy kills himself. The window's open and Billy's back there and Nicholson looks out in the window and he could go and it's probably gone. And he decides to go check on Billy. Like it was and those hierarchies, the prison hierarchies, like, no, I took Billy under my wing. I got him to lose his virginity, all this kind of like, I feel is a measure of responsibility.
I got to check on my kid here.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. The other thing, so the no doctor in this movie says he's crazy. No doctor. Every doctor's like, I think he's faking it. Pretty sure he's faking it. And they keep going on. And we were watching, my wife asked a good question. She's like, what's the purpose for them keeping him in there? Like, why are they keeping him? And the only answer I could really land on is that Ratched wants to try to control him. And
yes,
that's the only reasoning I have.
And it's like that Orly said, hey, you can do jail time and there's a limit to it. But when you're here, there's potentially no limit. And yeah, I think Ratched is like, okay, I can keep him here indefinitely. I mean, they were even discussing, let's send him back to the farm. He needs to go back to prison. And she talks him into, no, we can help him. He needs to stay here. But basically, I mean, he's a tough nut to crack, but she's determined to crack him.
She's, I'm going to do it no matter what it is. And eventually, obviously, it was taken out of her hands whenever her power is taken away. It's like, well, this is nipped in the bud. Louise Fletcher, in interviews, she said she wanted to make a side of kind of humanity out of Ratched, saying essentially like she did care about the patients, but and felt she was doing the best of them. But after the amount of time she's been there, she was misguided and drunk on her own power. She realized what the control, how control, like I like to think it's one of those things.
Power,
like
power corrupts and absolute power corrupts. Absolutely.
And not to mention, like, think of outside of that hospital, Ratched is probably an absolute nobody.
She's nothing.
She's nothing.
Yeah.
And she steps in there and she's God. Like it's
exactly.
Why would I want to relinquish that? And that just feeling of power. It's the only time she probably has control in her life. And I get it. I like that base understanding of it is very easy to understand. Yeah.
It really is. I mean, I think to some extent we are all self-serving, narcissistic enough to where we find this realm of control that, you know, whatever it may be, not even control over other people or anything, but I can control this.
Yep.
And if you lose that, your world goes into chaos.
Yep.
And so for her, ruling that ward with an iron thumb is her raison d'etre, and McMurphy's in there fucking it up.
It's
so
like, I'm not about to have this screw me up. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You know, the book written by Ken Kesey, Kesey very much not a fan of this movie. Now, from what I understand, the book and the movie are relatively narratively about the same thing happens from one thing to another. The big difference is that Chief is actually the narrator. He's the first,
interesting.
He's the narrator, and everything's from his perspective. So that's the big thing. And the other thing was that Kesey had an idea of what the character was, and he was lobbying hard for Gene Hackman to play McMurphy, just based on who the character was. And then whenever they signed Nicholson, he was like, this is a butchering of the book and the movie. And he essentially disowned it without ever seeing it and said he would never watch it. And my favorite little story about him is a couple of years later, like I said, he just hated it. He was in his bed one night flipping through channels on TV, and he settled into a late night movie. And he was like, "Oh, this is interesting." And after a few minutes, he realized he was watching One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and immediately turned it off. But I think it's more than anything, it's probably just like writer, like, this is this is my thing. You can't butcher my thing. This is what my thing is.
Yeah. Well, and you know what's so funny is that another famous Jack Nicholson movie, also featuring Catman Scruthers.
Yes. We talked about Catman Carruthers. Yeah.
Is Stephen King wrote The Shining and hated. Hates with a passion the movie.
Yep. It's when we talked about it in length in our Shining episode. I will link it right here. So yeah, it's funny because, you know, we've done a couple movies based on books, but it's a lot of times there are certain movies that based off of those books that like surpass the book 1,000 times out of 1,000. Jaws, Die Hard, being good examples of that. Some have kind of landed in the middle, like we talk about, like, you know, oh man, I'm trying to think, but Last of the Mohicans is probably a pretty good example where the book and the movie kind of stand on their own. They're not really the same thing. Like, one deviates so specifically from the original.
To Kill a Mockingbird.
To Kill a Mockingbird, great example where they're like great movie, great book, and they're separate and almost the same thing.
And that's okay.
Yeah. Like even the little changes in between, not that big of a deal. You know, I guess it's, you know, for Kesey, this is the thing his life was made of. Like this.
Yeah.
So a little bit of production history, which is interesting. So the movie was initially bought, the rights were bought in 1961 by Kirk Douglas, who really wanted to play McMurphy, to the point where they actually made it into a play. And Gene Wilder played the who did he play? He played the Billy character on.
Oh, okay.
And then there was one of our famous guy. It was Dale Harding was played by oh crap, I had it right here. The neighbor from Boy Meets World, Mr. Mr. Bell,
the teacher.
Why am I blanking on everything? I'm sorry. William Daniels, who played Mr. Feeney, was the
so Mr. Feeney. Yeah.
So yeah, it's you know, the Douglas wanted to play it for a long time. By the time it was gotten around to actually being ready to play, he was too old. So he gave it to his son, Michael, who produced it, and leading to the film we have today. This movie is really based off of the idea, the performances of Jack Nicholson and Louise Fletcher. You know, Ratched is such an interesting character. I want to talk about Fletcher for a little bit because she's such a fascinating character, but she's really not in the movie much.
Yeah, she's got such a huge role, though.
Yeah.
Which is funny. Yeah,
it's a huge role. She's not in it much, but I mean, it's the aura of her and the idea of Nurse Ratched in general is the thing that is hanging over everything.
Yeah, and she does an excellent job of that, I think. I mean, great performance. I hate her character.
Oh, it's terrible. Terrible.
Obviously, as you mentioned, I mean, she's listed as one of the great movie villains. But damn it, she does a great job at it, you know?
She's just so icy and unsympathetic. She said actually she was upset that, like, you know, obviously the characters, they had a bit of camaraderie between them and they could have a lot of fun towards the end of production. She said she was upset that she couldn't really laugh and be happy with the rest of everybody. It had to be cold and heartless. Near the end of the production, she removed her dress and stood only in her panties to prove to the cast members she was not a cold-hearted monster. It's like,
well, that's one way to do it.
Well,
All right.
it's kind of
I
funny.
guess we're okay.
Obviously, at the end with her in the neck brace, she's really took it down a peg, and she's actually seems kind of sweet. Like,
Yeah.
it's
Well, and I think it's really symbolic that McMurphy chokes her and takes away her speech.
Yes,
because
yes.
that is her source of power.
Mm-hmm.
So when he temporarily removes that, I mean, she's got nothing.
Yeah, and who knows how long she was gone recovering from that.
Right.
The book said it was a couple weeks, but I mean, like, yeah. So
and all the patients just kind of they just fall back in line. It's routine, but they know someone got it over on her.
Yep.
Someone, like, she's not invincible.
Nope.
So they've seen that, and she now knows that all of them know that.
And even,
so maybe we can be a little more reasonable here.
And even the interesting dynamic of it right at the end, whenever she's talking to whoever's coming in, who it's like she's behind the glass, she's like under the microphone, like there's protection, there's a barrier, like it's all that. Yeah. There's that kind of thing. Yeah, Fletcher's incredible in this. Wins an Oscar for it. Really, this is the movie that made her. This is really the only thing she's known for as an actress. Like for her entire life, she's like, oh, you're the lady from One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. She just passed away last September.
Yeah, I remember you telling me that.
Yeah, this is the movie she was known for. Famously, both her parents hard of hearing, and in her Oscar speech, she signed the last bits of her Oscar speech thanking her parents.
Oh wow, that's sweet.
Nicholson wins his first Oscar for this one, and we keep talking about it. It's so funny having, hey, Jack Nicholson's going to be a person in an insane asylum. Twist, he's the sane one, but it's perfect casting to the actor.
Yes, yeah. I mean, God, I think I love this movie so much, and I love Mac's character so much.
I agree.
And to me, it's very reminiscent of
Cool Hand Luke, very much so. Yeah. Just very like I'm against the establishment.
The guy is like, who's gonna bristle under authority, is gonna refuse to comply, and is gonna be a pain in the ass for the sake of being a pain in the ass.
Yeah, pretty much. Like, just it's like you're gonna try to like, and along Cool Hand Luke, and this is a really interesting comparison between the two, Cool Hand Luke and One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Essentially, I mean, like, okay, I'm here. Now the difference is Luke in his movie is really like, okay, I'm going to settle in and I'm going to take over slowly, not really intentionally do that, just against the establishment, but I'm going to do my own type of thing, not really trying to shake the boat. Well, Mac really wants to shake the boat from the second he gets there. And they're trying to knock him down a peg, and every time they knock him down a peg, he comes back up. And then eventually they have to defeat him the only way they know how to defeat him, by essentially murdering him.
Yeah. Removing most of his prefrontal cortex and turning him into a zombie. Really horrific procedure that used to go on a lot.
I mean, you see it like now, like that's one of the things about the interesting thing of watching this movie 50 years after it's made, it's 48 technically, but still, like, you look at these like archaic ways of handling, all the like generally what they do therapy-wise.
The electroshock therapy. Like, who thought, what'll fix this guy right up? Let's give him a seizure.
And the funny thing is
that'll fix his brain.
Electroshock therapy is not necessarily a negative thing as for what it does. I couldn't tell you what the actual purpose it does. I know it does help for some people. The other thing about it, there's two things I've always remembered about the truth of electroshock therapy. One, it doesn't hurt because they knock you out. you're unconscious.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
they're certainly not gonna be like, oh, little dab will do you. They'll bink, like so I mean,
Yeah. They also used to do insulin shock therapy.
yeah, that's
where
nuts.
They put you basically into it's a diabetic shock. I mean,
It's insane.
I don't know. I mean, obviously I'm not a doctor or a mental health professional, but man, I just don't know. I just don't see how inducing a seizure is going to help anyone,
It's very much like leeching. You're like, oh, well, you got to get the bad blood out. And you're like, what are you talking about, you idiot? Or
you're just bleeding them to death.
Yeah, like I'll watch an old movie and they'll talk about like, oh, I watched a movie where they were talking about, oh, he's this religion, and he was this is from the like 40s, and they're talking about him being a communist, and it's like, oh, he has no children, must have eaten them. It's like, what? It's like, yeah, communists eat babies. And I'm like, that is insane. It's like, it's just a little bit of logic. You're like, no, stop. Well, no. Seizures are good things.
Yeah. Well, look at the entire Black Plague. That was basically all caused because people started getting sick and they thought cats were witches causing it. So they killed all the cats, which made the rat population go nuts.
Yep.
Which is how the disease was spread.
Yep.
Like, I mean, and like Salem witch trials, you look back, it's like, okay, if we try to drown her, but she floats, she's a witch and we got to kill her. If she sinks, she's fine.
Whoops.
But dead.
Yeah, it's old. Like
what the fuck?
You kind of look at it, you always wonder, like 50 years in the future, where's the things we're doing around that's going to look that much archaic, and all the kind of archaic things. But back to Nicholson, it's funny, as he walks in, you're like, okay, let's get it. Like as soon as they unhook his chains, you're like, we know what's in store for this guy. Like we know exactly what we're getting. And Nicholson really never stops. He's just, and another thing my wife said is like, we're watching, is like, man, for a guy not being crazy, he sure tries to be at least seem crazy. Like it's when you have those Jack Nicholson just kind of eyes just staring through you.
It's eyebrows.
Those crazy eyebrows, just
witchy Christmas tree eyebrows.
Christmas tree. That's right. That's an old Miller family idiom. But
that's an old one. Yeah.
Nicholson and Fletcher both getting Oscar wins for this film. Very well received and earned. The supporting performances in this movie, debut film for Christopher Lloyd, Vincent Schiavelli, who's best known as the one of the ghosts in Ghost. He was in the train conductor, I guess. And then our my guy Brad Dourif, who's great in this movie as Billy.
Billy, yeah.
Do you know Brad Dourif's most famous role outside of this? He is
off the top of my head.
He is the voice of Chucky.
Oh no, really?
Yes, he is. It's probably the thing that's made him the most money in his life. Wow. Still acting, still doing stuff. I think he still might be doing. I think Chucky has a TV series now, and he's still the voice of Chucky. Been in 1,000 things. He was in a couple Alien movies, I think. A lot of different things throughout the years. Very steady worker ever since One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Never really achieved the level of success that One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest had, but he is so heartbreaking in this movie.
Yes, he is one of the most absolutely tragic characters. I mean, yes, I mean, to me, it does seem like he would be the type of guy that, like, if you're in a facility with, you would kind of be like, okay, I'm going to take this dude under my wing and make sure he's okay. And, kind of
Yeah.
take care of this kid,
I agree. It's
and especially the way Nurse Ratched just picks out on him. And
I'm by no means going to be an armchair psychologist about it. And I don't know anything about it as far as like the book is concerned, but it sure seems like he, I believe the term is Oedipal. If there might be some, obviously some mother issues outside of just, like it's like, oh, I'm going to tell your mom, and his repression and the love and the kill yourself and all that kind of stuff. And it's like, okay, but there might be some other things going on leading to Billy's current state of mind. There's sexual trauma or something along those lines, something with his mother, like there's
mommy issues. He's got mommy issues.
Obviously. Yeah. And you kind of look at
Oedipal is a good way to describe it. Potentially.
So he's that's such a incredible moment at the end of the movie, near the end of the movie, where it's like Billy, what'd you do that? It's like, what'd you do wrong? And clear as a bell. I didn't do anything wrong. Just no stutter, no nothing. And then she goes, I'm going to tell your mother. And then the stutter just comes back worse than it ever was before. It's like, it's like, that's of all the things Ratched does, that's the worst. It's just like, come on. He had his moment. He's like, he's lost his virginity. He's this. Yeah.
And really, I mean, you would think, as a mental health professional, I would think, hey, way to stand up for yourself, man. You're making your own way.
Yeah.
Hey, we're making progress. You're getting confidence. Now you broke the rules and stuff like that, and we'll address that.
Yeah.
But I appreciate you standing up for yourself. And did you notice that you didn't stutter whenever you told me that?
Yeah, that should have been a big breakthrough, as opposed to
huge breakthrough instead of the thing that ends his fucking life. You know, it's like God damn,
Ratched trying to keep the status quo as opposed to actually trying to help people. Like, she's like trying to keep her own level.
Yep.
Brad Dourif, exceptional in this film. I really liked Danny DeVito, incredibly annoying in this movie. And Nicholson keeps saying "hit me" during that one scene, just like Jesus. And that's the point. Christopher Lloyd doing a really great job of seemingly insane. Gets the big shout out, like Chief made it at the end. It's always nice. I really like Sidney Lassick, who really who plays Charlie Cheswick.
Cheswick,
he had a rough time during production. He got really, really, really into the movie, and apparently the cast and the crew were concerned about him because he was getting so into the movie. That at the final scene with McMurphy and the Chief, he got overwhelmed and had to be removed from the set. And I
also read that Danny DeVito was really questioning his mental health.
He started to struggle
towards the end of it,
and and
wrote to an imaginary friend and stuff, and really started.
Yeah, and a doctor essentially was on set because they were filming in an actual insane asylum, and there were actual patients around, and they said. And Danny DeVito's like, oh man, am I going nuts? And he goes, no, you're coping with it. You're using the imaginary friend to cope with this issue as opposed to going some other way of doing things. Poor William Redfield as Dale Harding. During this film, a lot of doctors on set. He said he was not feeling well. A doctor diagnosed him with leukemia, and he died 18 months later.
Oh my God!
But the third highest billed guy in this movie. A long history of a lot of interesting things he did, TV and stuff like that. And then Will Sampson is Chief. Fun fact about Will Sampson: he was a park ranger, and I guess they were looking to find somebody for Chief. And he was on he was not a park ranger. He was a rodeo. He was a bronc buster. And Michael Douglas and Saul Zentz, the other producer, were looking for a large Native American. They found him, and you're like, oh, you're 6'7". You're like, wow. So they go up to the rodeo announcer. They're like, hey, can you where's this guy? And, rodeo guys are like gypsies. As soon as they're gone, they're gone. And it took a long time to find him. And they found him, and they interview, and they're like, cool, hired. And then he had a nice steady career of doing some various things. He was an outlaw Josie Wales, various things along the lines, a lot of TV. As is the case with most Native actors, very much a staple in the political movements. He was on a film where they were using white actors to play Native Americans, and he walked off the set in protest, and all those type of things. So Will Sampson really enjoyable in this movie, and that speech talking about his dad, that's probably one of the more heartbreaking things. You're like, oh man,
it's tough, and it's like, man. So I'm probably showing that I'm not that great of a father, but I actually watched this with my daughter, she's almost 12, and she's a sharp cookie.
There's nothing too terrible in this movie. There are worse things you could definitely show her.
The victory of like when Chief starts playing basketball. No, my daughter was like, yeah, Chief. Yeah. So, yeah. I mean, that's definitely this great moment where you see this guy that's only been labeled as deaf and dumb.
Yep.
He can't speak. He can't hear. He does nothing except carry a mop.
Yep.
And you start seeing, there's
some more going on with this. Yeah. Yeah.
And then the famous juicy fruit scene.
Yeah.
And then he goes, you sly son of a bitch.
It's like,
he realizes it's a fellow con.
Playing the long game. I love it. It's really great. Like, and their dynamic is really fun too. It changes. So it's like just offering the gum and going like, well, why'd you defend me to begin with? That's a nice change of pace. But I mean, yeah. Yeah, I agree. I really like Chief in that one. And Scatman Carruthers obviously just showing up there at the end too, just for that little bit. Like a guy who definitely knows from the second he does everything. He's like, oh, I'm fired. Like,
he's like, I got booze and hookers.
Let's make this work for the best.
What am I supposed to do? Say no?
Right. All right, let's take a quick break and we'll come back. All right, we are back. Every week I go through the filmography of a filmmaker and put Jake's cinematic knowledge to the test. It is time for Pull for a Dumbass. For this week, we are doing the diminutive man himself, the 4'10" wonder that is Danny DeVito. This is not his first ever movie, but it's the first one where anybody knew who you're like, okay, you look back and you're like, there's Danny DeVito. The movies before that, his movies called Dreams of Glass, Lady Liberty, Hurdy Up, Probably 30, like movies I've never heard of. One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest kind of sent him off into any sort of prominence in 1975. And then he really, he started, like, he became famous Danny DeVito 3 years later because he was the lead in Taxi, the show Taxi, alongside Christopher Lloyd, by the way. So after Taxi leaves, he's like, okay, I'm gonna start being in stuff like where I'm Danny DeVito being Danny DeVito. The first movie I have from 1983, another Best Picture winner, actually. Have you seen Terms of Endearment? Yeah, he is in there he's just kind of like a half cameo, just kind of like, hey, I want to bang Shirley MacLaine, and that's kind of what he's there for. I mean, kind of serves a purpose, but Danny DeVito is always the kind of guy who's like, he's not the star of the movie generally. He's generally the guy who shows up for a little bit, is the memorable Danny DeVito role, and then he's gone pretty quick. So following Terms of Endearment, maybe his most famous acting role is the next film, the film Romance in the Stone. You ever seen Romance in the Stone?
Ooh, I don't think so. I mean, I know of it, but I don't think I've watched it.
It's it's one of those things where it's one of those movies where you're like, oh, it's too much plot. It's kind of dumb. The reasoning behind it all is like, it's all kind of stupid, but it's Michael Douglas and Kathleen Turner at just their like peak hotness, being hot in hot places. Like, it's like, yeah, that's like, that kind of fun swashbuckling thing, and DeVito
And then
pops in.
throw a Danny DeVito grenade in it.
Yeah, exactly. It's like let's have two hot people and wind them up with a little guy in between. Yeah. So Romancing the Stone, big hit. They did a sequel the next year, Jewel of the Nile. He actually does start to do other stuff as well. He actually starts to do more producing, and he made his directorial debut in 1987 with a movie he also co-starred in. Have you seen Throw Mama from the Train?
No.
So it's essentially he decided to make Strangers on a Train with Billy Crystal, but did it made it a comedy. Essentially, he has a terrible mother, played by Lynn Ramsey, the bad girl from the Goonies, the bad lady from the Goonies.
Oh.
And Billy Crystal. So they're on this train, and they're like, "Hey, can you kill my mother?" And it's kind of this agreed upon thing. And it's a dark comedy. It's enjoyable. It's a lot of fun. It's a silly little movie. Lynn Ramsey was nominated for Anne Ramsey, excuse me. Anne Ramsey was nominated for an Oscar for it. Throw Mama from the Train from the 80s is not bad. So after that point, like Throw Mama from the Train was a pretty decent hit. So after that point, they're like, okay, what do you want to do? You want to kind of expand things? It's like, yes, I want a true starring role. I want to play the brother of Arnold Schwarzenegger in Twins.
Why not?
On paper, it's so stupid. And it just works because it's the Arnold Schwarzenegger plays a straight man. He's very like straight-laced, like smart, intelligent guy. Like it's one of those 80s premises where you're like, this is so dumb.
Mm-hmm.
But it kind of works.
Yeah, I guess. But yes, I've seen Twins, but
Twins is
it's kind of like
Twins is ridiculous. At one point, they were
why are you Austrian? Why are you like?
Well, thank the Lord, but they almost made a sequel called Triplets, where Eddie Murphy was going to be a third brother. How that was going to work, I don't know. Well. I'm luckily, apparently, cocaine has its limits. So
yeah, it's got to run out eventually.
I'm not sure if you've seen this movie. This is a really interesting one. The next one, 1989, he directs again and co-stars again with Kathleen Turner and Michael Douglas. Have you seen the film The War of the Roses? They are Kathleen Turner and Michael Douglas. I don't think so. Kathleen Turner and Michael Douglas are a married couple, and they're getting divorced. And they essentially are just trying to destroy each other's lives physically and mentally. And Danny DeVito is just telling the story about all of it. It's a really interesting, another really dark kind of movie. Danny DeVito, he seems like a really pleasant guy, but everything he kind of goes towards is really kind of darker in sense. He has, inherent darkness in him. I guess he doesn't express out in the world. Speaking of a darkness, 1992, spent a ton of time in the makeup chair and probably made the biggest paychecks of his life. Batman Returns as the Penguin. Yes.
Yep.
He is so creepy in that movie.
He is a great freaking penguin.
Yes, he is. He's really, really good at it. I mean,
he's got the physique.
Yes. And that gravitas to it. He really works well with the makeup as opposed to the makeup getting it. Like it all works.
Yeah.
I
think that's one of the best Batmans.
I think so too. And it's so weird. It's so weird.
It is.
Like they made the first Batman, and it's like it was such a hit, obviously with Jack Nicholson in it, and sells toys and all this kind of stuff. And they like, hey, Tim Burton, Michael Keaton, we want to double down and give you more money. And Tim Burton goes, okay, but you're going to let me do what I want to do? And they went, yeah, sure. And they delivered the movie and they went, oh no.
Yeah.
Sadomasochism and
wind Tim Burton up and let him go. And like, you asked for it.
It's an exceptional superhero movie. And he is great as the Penguin, and he's not even the best villain in his own movie, because Michelle Pfeiffer as Catwoman in that movie is incredible. She is so
She's
good
too.
She's really good in that movie.
Yep.
So he's starting to do a little more producing. He's actually one of the executive producers on Pulp Fiction. Helped bring that to the forefront. But a follow-up to Twins, a movie I definitely know you have seen. And if Twins was dumb, this was dumber. Have you seen Junior?
Yeah.
It sounds like a fever dream the more I try to explain it to people. Like, okay,
Yeah.
so Arnold Schwarzenegger gets pregnant. You're like, that doesn't make any sort of sense. It's like, yeah, it doesn't. Somehow Emma Thompson is in this. Like, and not only Emma Thompson, Emma Thompson has 2 Oscars. She won one in 1992 for a movie called Howard's End, where she's incredible. And then she wins one the next year for writing Sense and Sensibility. This is right in the middle of that. She has a pair of Oscar wins and Junior in the middle of it. It's insane. Junior is terrible.
I do not understand how that even went anywhere at all. Like, okay, here's the premise. Arnold Schwarzenegger gets pregnant. Okay, why did it go beyond that? Why did someone not go, nope, get out of my fucking office?
Well,
like, I'll never understand that.
Yeah. I mean, Golden Globe nominee for Best Actor in a Musical or Comedy and Best Actress in a Musical or Comedy for Schwarzenegger and Emma Thompson in this movie. The Golden Globes can be bought, is what you're saying. Also, it made $108 million. It's audiences are dumb. Junior's
whatever.
Bad. Junior's stupid. Now, obviously, it's just a chance for him to hang out with Arnold Schwarzenegger again. But the next year, maybe one of his more interesting type of roles. Have you seen the film Get Shorty?
Yes.
And he plays a pretentious actor. And hilariously, in the movie, he is coming hot off the heels of a movie adaptation of the movie Napoleon. The role he was born to play. All joking aside, they're making a Napoleon movie this year starring Joaquin Phoenix. So get ready for that one. Now we're talking about, like, okay, he does some dark stuff, and generally he's kind of has that darkness in him when he does stuff. Have you seen the film Matilda from 1996?
Yes.
So he directed that as well as was a co-star in it. So the story,
it's pretty creepy for kind of a kids movie. Yeah.
Yes.
It's a like dark comedy.
Yes.
I don't know.
So from what I understand, so obviously Rhea Perlman, Danny DeVito's wife, was in the movie as well. And during the filming of that, Mara Wilson, the girl who plays Matilda, her mother was dying of cancer. And Danny DeVito and Rhea Perlman essentially half adopted her during the filming in order to.
Oh, wow.
It just all the stories of him from that movie is nothing but just brilliance upon brilliance. It's always nice to have those type of things. Same year as Matilda, re-teaming with Tim Burton after Batman Returns. Have you seen Mars Attacks?
Yeah.
It's so dumb. Talk about another Jack Nicholson movie. It's a really dumb movie. I like a lot of the interesting things it does, because Tim Burton hires Jack Nicholson to be the president, and he was specifically told by the studio, it's like, you can't kill Jack Nicholson. So he gave him 2 roles and killed him twice. Just to screw with the people. So I mean, kind of the thing he does. Everybody's in Mars Attacks, by the way. There's 1,000 people in Mars Attacks.
Yes.
1997, big year for him. He was in the movie The Rainmaker with Matt Damon. It would have been his big breakthrough role if it wasn't for Good Will Hunting. I wasn't going to include that one though. The role that I probably most suited for a voice actor, Philosophitis in Hercules, the little hoofed man in the animated Hercules.
Okay. Yes.
Forget the name. Like, I'm looking at the name and I still don't know how to say it. Phil is what they called him. Phil.
Wow.
He's a satyr. So really perfect voice casting for that film. I figured you had seen Hercules. And then Obviously, his I'll include this as well just to bump up your score. 1997 being L.A. Confidential.
Yes,
Obviously, since we did the
we've already covered
episode
it.
about it. He does a lot of stuff. He'll be a producer on a movie and he'll pop himself into it. In 1999, have you seen the Andy Kaufman film Man on the Moon? Jim Carrey is Andy Kaufman. I haven't seen it either. The interesting thing about Man on the Moon being an Andy Kaufman movie is he is in Danny DeVito is Man on the Moon as a character named George Shapiro, who's a real person. The funny thing about it is Andy Kaufman was on Taxi, and Danny DeVito was actively involved with knowing Andy Kaufman, but didn't play himself. It's kind of a weird anti-meta way of doing it. But it makes sense why he's a producer on that if he knew Andy Kaufman in general. So he does little stuff over now. He does directs some stuff that really goes nowhere. The movie Duplex, Death to Smoochie. But I was looking at his filmography and I had to include this. Had a little cameo role in this movie from 2000 and I lost it 2003. Reteaming with Tim Burton. How about Big Fish?
I love Big Fish.
I know you love Big Fish.
I love Big Fish.
I know you love Big Fish. It's very much suited to a Tim Burton type of style, but a little sweeter than it ever really needs to be.
Yeah.
Big Fish is awesome. We might need to do Big Fish one day. Big Fish is a nice, sweet movie. One of those cry at a movie theater movies.
Yep. Cried at a movie theater.
Yeah. Big Fish is one of those type of movies. I only have a couple others. Reteaming with, Disney loves redoing their own movies, and they did a live action version of Dumbo. Did you see the live action version of Dumbo from a couple of years ago? I didn't either.
No.
He was in it with quite a few people. I think actually Michael Keaton was in that too. Colin Farrell, Michael Keaton, Alan Arkin. But I hadn't heard much good things about it. Now, the Jumanji movies, they've remade those Jumanji movies, and the last one had Danny DeVito in it. Did you see Jumanji: The Next Level?
Yes, we have watched all the Jumanjis.
Yes, my kids love the Jumanji movies.
He was same here.
In that one. They're perfectly disposable. Like they're on a lot, and you can be like, this is fine. Yeah, so makes sense. I wasn't going to include it obviously because it's television, but have you seen much It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia?
Yes.
You do.
Yeah. There's one of the best episodes ever in TV was one of those, and I just it was so ridiculous. I could it was wonderful. It was
which episode? I am by no means a big. I've seen it and I enjoy it. I just don't watch it on a regular basis.
All right, so this is one, and I'm kind of the same way. I'm not I haven't watched every episode. I haven't, but the one guy who's gay.
Yes. Mac.
So Mac. Yeah. He's walking along a sidewalk, and there's a furniture moving company loading a grand piano. Okay. They're pulling it up to several stories up to deliver it. And Danny DeVito's on the other side of the street, and he sees the rope unraveling. It's fixing to fall on Mac. And he goes, "Look out, F word."
Oh no.
Look out, F word. And so last minute he moves out of the way. And so, but then after that, they can't figure out if he is the hero or if he committed a hate crime.
That's great.
Do we give him credit? But he called him the F word. I I think that was a hate crime.
That's
He's like, I
great.
saved his life. He's like, but you called him the F word.
I like that. See
It's
that's the
hilarious.
absurdity of that show is pretty fantastic. Like where they'll take a pretty like a silly premise and they just take it to another level that you can't really normally take stuff. And there's just like it's like, oh, I'm going to be homeless. Why? Why not? Like just it's, just these ridiculous scenarios.
Well, and I like shows like that don't take themselves too seriously, and they're willing to go ad absurdum.
Yeah,
you know what I mean.
It's funny. Even Danny DeVito didn't show up to, I guess, to the third season. But then it's the thing most people know of him for anything else these days, and still going strong. So 15, 16 season in. So good for them. Danny DeVito, 11 out of 16. Pretty good. Only missed Terms of Endearment, Twins, Batman Returns, The Cinematic Classic Junior, Get Shorty, Matilda, Mars Attacks, LA Confidential, Hercules, Big Fish, and Jumanji: The Next Level. 11 out of 16. Pretty well done, sir. You definitely had worse.
Not too bad. Oh yeah.
All right. I think it's about that time, buddy.
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to be a Nurse Ratched about it, but I mean, you're in the hot box, dude.
Each episode, instead of me steering the conversation, Jake peppers me with a series of questions that I must answer truthfully. Sometimes it's trivia, sometimes it's not. If I don't answer correctly, he'll tell my mother. What you got for me, buddy?
All right. Mac ends up running a card game with cigarettes as Tinder, the what they're betting on or whatever. But let's say you're in some confined situation, you have to pass time, and cards are the way to do it. What's your go-to card game if you need to kill some time?
So I always think this depends on how many people you have there. Like if you're by yourself, solitaire is the already go to. If you got two people, gin. And if you got four, hearts or spades. Maybe spades or hearts, maybe like especially if you're in a sane asylum, it's like, well, you don't want to make things too complicated. But I mean, they were just weren't they just playing blackjack? Like,
yeah, I think it was just black.
Okay.
Yeah, because he kept saying hit me.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. That's right. So
he's like, you're at 20. And he's like, hit me.
No. But I mean, I would think I would get really good at, and I think I would be very much like Nicholson, just like I'd have a pack of cards. And after a while, I'd be like, I would learn sleight of hand and, those ornate card tricks where you fan them out. You have nothing better to do.
Exactly. You have nothing else to do.
I always think about like The Great Escape, where every time Steve McQueen goes into the box, or the cooler, I'm just like, man, give him the baseball and glove. I'm like, you really want to punish him? You take away that ball and glove. It's like, I think I'll be fine if I have that ball and glove in there. But I mean, it's like,
I mean, and just little things like, I mean, a yo-yo or
something.
God,
learn just Shawshank learning chess, just anything to pass the time. It's the, you on paper, you think of prison and you think of all the first thing your mind goes to is all the bad parts. But I've heard a lot of things. It's like prison is it's boring. Just nothing to do. It's even if you're not working, it was like, well, what am I going to do? Sleep? It's like, no, I've set hours for that. And the rest of the time you're just bored stiff.
Yeah. Boredom's a hell of a thing.
Ugh.
I mean, if you're sitting around not being able to do what you want, and then, then the mind
wanders.
Can, what is it? Idle hands are the devil's playground.
That's right. It's like as soon as
that's a perfect thing to do with a bunch of criminals is just make them not do anything and sit there and think of shit to do.
Yep.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's why. Why do you think guys get education? It gives them something to do. It's something to occupy their time. It's not necessarily like I don't necessarily think it's something. It's like, oh, I want to strive myself. It's like, well, I was in there for 4 years. Why are you so good at Spanish now? It's like, well, what else am I supposed to do? It's like, yeah,
I had 4 years to work on it.
yeah.
Yeah. All right. So you go into this mental health facility.
Okay.
Okay. And you look at the crew you got in there. Who is someone that you automatically is like, I'm going to try to make friends with this dude. Like, I want this guy on my side. Not only like, I mean, more out of a selfish, like,
Yeah.
okay, I need to be friends with this guy, you know.
It's funny. I gravitate towards Christopher Lloyd's Max. Like I saw him and I'm like, okay, the guy lashing out at anger, like it's like he wants everything in a certain order. And if you can kind of be on his side, either you can calm him down, or you can never be the side of his retribution. Like if he's so frustratingly angry at everything, it's like he can't stand Danny DeVito's character. He can't stand Martini.
Yeah.
Anytime Martini does anything, you drive him nuts. But I mean, like as far as I think of it in self-preservation tactics, I would automatically go to Max. As far as like actual personality, you would kind of go towards Billy just because it's like he's a pretty sweet, level-headed kid. Like
I said, he's someone you would kind of be like, okay, I need to, need to help this kid out. Now, try to help him along.
Now, knowing what we know with the perspective, we're like, well, obviously, Chief. Like, it's like obviously,
yes.
It's like you got Chief as your buddy. Like you're beating up orderlies, he's going to throw a couple orderlies down. Like he's going to help you out in these situations.
Yeah. No, that would be me. I'd go in there as like, who's the biggest motherfucker in here? We're about to become best friends, and when I'm in a tussle, if I got the biggest bastard in here pulling people off my back, then I'm doing all right.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I agree. I've actually at times, like I'd been in like a bar area and I'm like, this place is getting a little rowdy. Maybe I'd befriend somebody it's like that I normally wouldn't befriend, just to be nice. Like not like being like, hey buddy, you want to be like, you help me beat somebody up, but like enough to where like, okay, if somebody hits me, at least he'll probably hit them. Like
yeah. You got my back, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I know we just met, but
yeah. It's funny social dynamics. As soon that's the first thing you think of when you get in those situations.
Yeah. It's self-preservation. It's survival.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I don't know if you noticed this. To me, there was tons of correlations between this film and Cool Hand Luke.
Yes. Once you said it, I realized it, but yeah, I wasn't thinking it at the moment. Yeah.
And there's a lot of comparisons, that I can make there, but did you happen to notice? So whenever Mac hijacks this boat, takes all the guys out on a fishing trip for the day, how many patients did he have with him?
Did he have 12 with him?
Yep.
He had exactly 12
on a fishing trip,
including the ladies.
No, not including the ladies.
Just the patients.
Just the dudes.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. That's
he had 12.
His 12 disciples.
Yeah, and we discussed like the Christ complex, where there's this scene where Paul Newman's literally like laid out like on a crucifix.
Yep.
And I mean, Mac is really laying his stuff on the line for the benefit of these other guys.
Yeah.
And I mean, obviously he's a troublemaker.
Sure.
He's not just pure hearted, but just that Christ complex type of, I don't know. That's small references like that. I just can't think they're coincidence.
And I mean, it also like you look at, Ratchet's hair is not like devil horns. Like not like it's not
Goat.
yeah, exactly.
Like,
It's not accidental.
Yeah.
Like it's also like, find it really interesting. I was fascinated whenever, so we're in the shock area. What do they call it? The shock shop.
Yeah.
The gentleness and the calm with all the nurses comparatively to the other one, like where the orderlies over there are kind of rough and tumble, and these are like it's just the different, like kind of the, like, this is where the bad things happen, but they're still nicer about it.
Something else I noticed, especially about that scene, once they take him to go get shocked.
Yeah.
All the orderlies up until that point are black.
Yes.
Once they take them back there, it's all white dudes. And I was like, oh God, they brought out the white dudes.
You got to keep you at ease. Like,
but I hadn't noticed that previously watching it, but I did notice like the normal day-to-day orderlies
they're all black,
are all black guys. And then, all the serious stuff, it's like white dudes and doctors and all this shit. And I'm like, well, that ain't no good, man. Get out of there.
It's also,
something bad's about to happen.
It's you got to think of like so I guess this is set in 63. It's set in 63.
Yes.
So I mean,
63.
You're in the middle of segregation and all that kind of stuff. I know you're up north in Oregon, but still, like, there are certain jobs they would allow black people to have, and with any sort of responsibility, they're not going to let a black guy have that. And so, like you said, it's like, oh, there are white faces. Oh no, why are there white faces? Like, it's a really interesting way to put that. And I'd like to now I'm curious to watch it again, kind of with that idea in mind, about the Christ complex, and not even the way he's in the water, and those scenes like that, and discovering. Yeah, it's really interesting. I really like that kind of thought process behind it. It's interesting.
Yeah. Let's see if I had anything else. I've got a few other things to say, but I'm done with questions for you.
All right.
So you're out of the hot box.
I appreciate that. Now, I did want to ask you real quick. Have you heard of the series Ratched on Netflix?
No.
Okay. So the series Ratched on Netflix is it's a psychological thriller starring Sarah Paulson as Nurse Mildred Ratched as she comes up, previous to the events of this movie. It is not in any way accurate. It's more like, oh, she is a horror villain for the sake of this show.
Okay.
And then knowing that was the kind of show, and watching this movie again, I'm just like, no, she's corrupted, but she's not sadistic.
Yeah.
She's not murdering people. Like,
she's flawed, but not. Yeah. Inherently evil.
Yes.
Maybe.
Yes. I have not seen it either.
She acts like it, but.
Yeah. I haven't seen it either, but so it's on Netflix if you wanted to check it out. It's only one season so far, so I mean, never know.
Yeah. Well, the only other thing I wanted to say is just obviously this is a heavy subject, dealing with mental health and suicide and all this kind of stuff, and I'm not ashamed to admit I've dealt with mental health issues. We've had family members deal with it. And so I just want to tell everyone out there, if you need help, get help. You're probably not going to get lobotomized nowadays.
Probably not, but still.
But there's tons of resources out there. And so if you need help, please get help. And it's something it could be as simple something as simple as just calling your friend. Like,
Yep, absolutely.
I can call Ben.
Yep.
I know I can call Ben. You know,
I agree.
There's also just a few resources. There's a suicide prevention hotline. You can call 1-800-273-8255. Or you can also text home to the crisis text line at 741-741. And this is basically going to be a free ad read for this company, but it's one that I've used, and it's one that I'll stand by, and I don't care if they never give me a dime. But it's a great freaking resource to go to, and it's betterhelp.com. It's online therapy, tons of resources. But
yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
I mean, I just want to tell everyone out there, hey, if things get strange, I've been there, and don't.
I agree. Thank you for telling the world that and being that honest about it. I really appreciate it. And it's nice to, at the end of this episode, obviously having that message is a nice little thing to kind of end it on. And it's, I always appreciate all the, your openness to it. And I sure our listeners will appreciate it as well. Jake, before we go, I know this is one of your all-time favorite movies. What is your film rating for One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest?
Man, it's probably, I mean, while it is a tough watch and it's heavy, it's got to be top 10.
Yeah, for you.
It's got to make top 10. Yeah, for me.
I'm a big.
It is heavy.
I'm a big fan of it. It is heavy. 1975 is one of those years where it's tough to ever try to pigeonhole a movie down. You're like, oh man, 1975 had all these movies. What one? One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Oh, okay. Well, that's fine. I'm certainly not gonna complain about that. I have it. It's not my favorite movie of the year, but I do really like it. 4.5 out of 5. I have it 34th all time on the best picture winners, just behind Patton. Okay. So like it's all right. Of best picture winners, it's more than worthy to be a part of it. And the movie's in 1975. Exactly. It's like, it's an exceptional movie. It does a lot of great things, exceptional performances. There's not really a thing I can say bad about it. It's just,
it's really beautiful, but it is tragic.
Yes. So I do agree.
Yeah.
Anything else before we go, buddy?
I don't think so, man.
All right. That just about does it for this episode of the Film Critic, the Common Man. Thank you so very much for joining us. You can follow me on Twitter at NebHasBeen, on Letterboxd at Neb810, on Instagram at Ben Miller Movies. Check out my website, icecreamforfreaks.com. You can follow my other writing on the film experience and Cinema Scholars. I am doing all sorts of other pods. Cinema Scholars are starting their own podcast. I might be hanging out on there a little while. Nice. You can find me on the other pods, the David Thewlis of podcasting. Jake, where can the people find you? I know if you escape from an insane asylum, you're not just going to go on a little fishing trip and just come back in a couple hours.
No. Yeah, I'm going fishing as long as I can.
Not to mention you're in Oregon. Oh man. It's like you can.
Oh yeah, it's got to be gorgeous.
Yes. Yeah. So,
hell yeah.
Make sure
I'll be on the lake with the rest of them.
The rest of the
loons. 12 disciples. Okay.
It's funny. It's like all the insane asylum patients are in the front looking at the hookers. Jake's like, no, I'm focusing on the fishing, man. It's like I get
Yeah, are you kidding? Yeah.
Make sure to follow the podcast on Critic at Critic Comment Pod on Twitter. Please like, subscribe, rate, and review. Enjoy the show wherever you get your podcast. Apple Podcast, Spotify, all those fun places. We'll catch you guys next time. We got a fun one next week. We're finally coming all the way around. We're doing our second episode ever for our 36th episode we're doing The Town, Ben Affleck's The Town next week. We will catch you guys next time. Thank you so very much for joining us.
What's the trick? What's the trick? In making my love stick. What's the trick?